Well, I appreciate you reaching out and doing this. As you know, as it gets hard. Oh, I like your cap, by the way. I love figuring it.
Yeah, it's great, eh?
Yeah, I drank about 6 cups of that this morning.
Yeah, you get their beans.
But I get them ground.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, nice.
Cool.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
There is a nice little success story out of Sussex, the way they've expanded and they got the roaster right on site and everything.
Big time, yeah. And what a gorgeous spot. No,
absolutely.
It's phenomenal. But no, thanks so much for doing this. As you know, it gets harder and harder to get the word out about shows. So I do really appreciate you getting in touch. Thank you.
No problem. Obviously got some shows coming up, and I'm going to touch on the comedy for sure. But one thing I'd be kind of curious starting with is your education in women's studies. I thought that was a pretty interesting just side of your career and life, and I wouldn't mind kind of learning about that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was born out of various things. When I went to university, I knew I wanted to study English literature, and part of that was born out of when I was very young. I would write letters to people that did the jobs that I wanted to do. So I would write to. I was very much undecided as a child. In actual fact, oddly, I would say for someone that was kind of in their early teens or even younger, I was already panicking over what path should I take, comedy or journalism. Like okay. I was a weird kid, is what I'm trying to say. And it was just to jump ahead, like to this day, like I still can't believe that I've found myself in a position where I'm able to do both things. But back then it was, such a concern. Which one should I focus on? And I used to write to, there was a film critic called Barry Norman, who was kind of like Britain's Roger Ebert. And it was him that said to me, if you want to become a film critic, what you should do is write for the university newspaper and then and study English literature. So that's what I did. But then they offered me a chance to minor in something else. And I, at this point, I think nowadays most men who aren't Donald Trump would consider themselves feminists. But back then it wasn't such, or there was a lot of misconceptions about what a feminist was. Mm-hmm. And I was very blessed to have an English teacher at school called Mrs. Murphy, who was our English teacher for our GCSEs, and she was diagnosed with lung cancer and obviously told she didn't need to finish teaching us, but she was adamant that she wanted to keep teaching us, and actually taught us from her bed in her home. Wow. And she was, just a true kind of hero, like all teachers, like it's an amazing woman. And she was very interested in feminist readings of classic novels, which I found as a very, I don't know what it is. Maybe it was having what at the time was undiagnosed ADHD, but obviously not knowing that. But I found it very hard to often focus on things, and giving this lens of when we were studying, whether it was Shakespeare or Chaucer or Emily Bronte, and giving this focus of looking at it from a feminist perspective, gave me something to focus on. So I became very interested / obsessed with that / also it was like the first time I found myself kind of able to do well at something. So she tragically passed shortly after we left school. So when I was given this opportunity at university to minor in something, women's studies seemed a natural choice. And of course, it's interesting because when you do, and then of course, people often joke like, did you do this because it meant it would be me and 500 women in a class? And the universities are definitely adept at weeding out those men. I remember when I started, there were 2 or 3 other men in the class who I think they were clearly there for seduction reasons, as opposed to interest in. But I would say that I was. Actually, even now, right behind where I'm sitting, I would say half of the books behind me are books by Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks was the feminist I became most interested in, because she, of course, is the leading kind of spokesperson, or was the leading spokesperson for Black feminism. And Black feminism, interestingly, was the first feminism that, or the branch of feminism that acknowledged the importance of the man in a female in a family unit. Because prior to that, radical feminism had very much kind of wanted to exclude men, and Bell Hooks and other Black feminists were the first ones to come along and say, well, actually, my father was an important part of shaping me. Anyway, so all of these things I found so fascinating, and I worked very closely with a lot of women's charities. But we went on marches, was very involved in activism. I've written for the Feminist Times before, so that was something which I think it was like a lot of things. An amazing teacher inspired me to have that interest.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been interesting seeing society in some ways evolve since then, and obviously going through, important movements like the Me Too movement, only for things to then get completely flipped on the head, and everyone has to explain to their children, or indeed anyone, how a rapist became the president of the United States of America. No one saw that coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like flipped around backwards. And but one thing you touched on, one thing I'd like to think about too is like, or maybe I should ask you this really, and I'm kind of maybe putting my own spin on it because this is kind of how I feel, but like in the creative world, it seems like a lot of men are probably like leaning towards the feminine energy, whether they kind of like project it or not. I don't know.
Point.
Do you feel that way at all? Yes,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I would say that's a very, very good point. I think, for a lot of creative, a lot of us grew up possibly not fitting into certain boxes in terms of what is considered to be a man, and certainly in a lot of cases, certainly in my case, didn't have many friends growing up, so certainly didn't have many male friends. So my friends were my grandmother, my grandmother's friends, and then as I got older, definitely related to girls more because I didn't play sports. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to, all the things that traditionally certainly teenage boys were doing and were into. They wouldn't. So yes, it's a very interesting point that I definitely have always gravitated towards. Yeah, I guess I know you didn't mean like this, but I am kind of a woman. Is what yeah, and hopefully all the better for it. But yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, do you feel the same way? Like you always kind of gravitated towards female company, or?
Yeah, well, yes, I do now. I didn't realize it early in my life, but like, definitely now, like at home, my wife, she studied plumbing, and like,
right.
Like, if I gotta like use a screwdriver or like, replace a piece of trim or recock the tub, I go to her for advice because she kind of helps me through it.
That's hilarious. I'm literally in the exact same boat. Like, I mean, to the extent that generally, like my father-in-law, who is an old school, man's man, like, a Kingston Peninsula man, proper old school. He is very unimpressed when he comes to our house, and his daughter is the one on the roof fixing the tile, and then I'm the one inside, kind of, baking fairy cakes or doing the ironing because that's the only stuff I know how to do. So yes, it's interesting how gender roles it can and have shifted. And yes, to your point, like I mean, my wife is the handy person around the house. Nate Bargatze, the comedian, has a wonderful routine about this, about how whenever there's like work people in the house and they've come to do something and they'll turn to him because he's the man. And he's like, I don't even know why you're here. Like, and similarly, like, my wife will arrange for someone to come and fix the boiler. And then they turn to me and go, right, so where's the boiler? And I'm like, could you describe it? Like, what does it look like? What kind of, what area of the house would you normally, and I'm like, well, again, that's the basement. Does this look like the kind of place where the thing that you said you had to fix? It's, it's funny.
That's very hilarious. Yeah, my father-in-law's the same way, diesel mechanic, basically built his own house, building a second house, fix all his own cars. Very first time I ever met him, he came to me, shook my hand and said, "So what do you do for a living?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a musician." And he goes, "Well, what does that pay?" And I started laughing nervously and go, "Well, actually, sometimes I have to pay to go to work."
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. And likewise, you can imagine when I suddenly broke the news 20 years ago to him and his daughter that I was going to take up comedy, and that already I wasn't around very much, but suddenly I was going to be gone for long periods of time. And they said, oh, well, at least we'll have a bit more money. I'm like, no. We're going to have a lot less money because I'm going to be spending £100 on a train to go to the middle of nowhere to do a gig, and then probably need to pay for a hotel. I'm not going to be paid for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And then on the rare occasion you do see me, I'm going to be so depressed because I'm going to have been booed off stage for the last 10 nights in a row.
It's not like going out to Alberta, sending home, tar sand money.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, getting booed off stage, I kind of wonder. So, in a band, I've had only a couple of shows where, like, you can tell the crowd is like not into you. Right. But as a comedian, I feel like you're so much more exposed because you're up there by yourself. So, what does that feel like to get booed off stage?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the being booed off stage thing is something which people often ask about, but oddly, it's actually possibly less crushing because it's such a visceral reaction, and it's something that you can actually act on, which is to leave. The worst thing is the silence. It's when a gig's just completely silent, or then suddenly like there's murmuring starts and the murmuring grows. And I mean, there's no getting around the fact that it is completely soul and spirit crushing. But what's kind of funny now is that, I mean, I think part of me, when I was coming up through the ranks and these things were happening, and there was always part of me that thought, well, this is all part of the training. This is all part of it didn't make me feel better. I mean, don't get me wrong, I did many nights where I was kind of on the tube train or the bus or the train, literally in floods of tears and thinking, I'm never going to do this again. But there was always a part of me in the back of my brain that was thinking and saying to myself, well, everyone went through this. This is what it takes. And this thing just happened that is possibly one notch or one step closer to me improving at this, or, so there was always an element of that. But I mean, yeah, it's all of that said, when you are booed off stage, it is every bit as awful as one might think it would be.
Okay. But it's the silence. Sometimes the silence cuts deeper.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Like,
that's interesting.
And I've had some, I've had some gigs actually. I remember doing one for a load of what are in England called estate agents, but obviously here are called realtors. But interestingly, I had a gig for 400 realtors here in St. John yesterday, which was an absolute joy.
Okay.
Which maybe I didn't really make the connection actually until right now. This is why I love having chats like this, because it's like therapy. Maybe I've been somebody's exercised this soul demon from about 15 years ago. It was again a similar number of people, like 400, 500 realtors. It was in a conference room in Guildford, in Surrey, and basically, long story short, I was introduced to the stage, and the whole room just thought it was a Christmas party. They all started talking, and no one was. It started off with just a couple of people kind of facing me, and then they kind of turned away. And I'm basically on a stage talking to a room full of 400 people, all just talking to each other. And I knew that I had to do my time. So I basically walked up and down the stage. And sometimes you'll do the act anyway. Sometimes you'll attempt it, even if no one's listening. In this instance, I just started walking up and down going, ba, ba, ba. Like just making random sounds. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, how much time left? And I basically just stood up there for an hour, pacing the stage, and then got off, got my check, and then went away thinking I can never do this again. But that following night, I was back on stage.
Well, that's kind of so. I mean, there's a difference between corporate gigs and what's the other word for it? Regular gig?
Like club gigs.
Club gigs.
Yeah.
And is it the corporate gig? You kind of probably never. I mean, you never know what you're going to anyway. But like, what's the difference between the feeling of a corporate gig versus a club gig?
Well, good question. I mean, in England, the corporate gigs are known as being awful and soul destroying. But and the main reason being that essentially, either no one wants to be there, like they're not there by choice, or if they do want to be there, they're not there to see you. So, I mean, actually, the difference is that in a comedy club, in theory, the reason that, statistically you're going to have a better experience is that everyone in that room has paid physical money to see a comedian, and they may not like you, but they are there for comedy. Whereas corporate gigs in Atlantic Canada do tend to be very nice. I mean, sometimes, the things you have to get used to, one of the techniques you always have to get used to as a comedian when you move into corporate. And of course, traditionally, famously, they often, obviously pay a lot better. But yes, they're private events where in some instances, it could be a company, it could be an organization, could be a particular field. It could be, I've done everything from the Crane Rental Association of Nova Scotia to the Insurance Salesman Conference of Canada, like, you name it. And generally in Canada, they are quite nice in that people are friendly. But the thing you have to almost train your brain to understand is that it's not going to be the blistering, loud laughter of a comedy club. Also, invariably, they have to be clean as well. You also can't react to a heckle or a chatty audience member in the same way as you would in a club. In a club, you have carte blanche to A, say what you like, obviously, but B, if someone's talking or someone heckles, you can just destroy them. Like, no comedy club is ever going to be mad at a comedian for, hammering down a disruptive member of the audience. In a corporate gig, it could be the CEO shouting at you, or and everyone there has paid good money to be there. They are all your bosses. So you also have kind of both hands tied behind your back in the respect that you've got to respond respectfully. That's it. Like I said, my corporate gig experiences here are generally pleasurable. But yeah, it's never going to be in a comedy club. The room is built for comedy, low ceilings. There's been loud music building up. You've had opening acts. Everything about the room screams comedy. In a corporate gig, invariably you are there. They've been in meetings all day in that same room. They've just had a meal. In some cases, they've sat through a 45-minute speech from the CEO before, and then you're brought up at 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and they're tired. So a mistake that a lot of comedians do make when they shift from club to corporate is they kind of grow frustrated that the laughs aren't bigger, because it's not what they're used to. Whereas what you've got to kind of do is go, okay, if they're laughing along politely, quietly, just keep delivering it to the best way you can. Because if you start to get agitated, then suddenly you're flustered, and then everything goes wrong. So it's about I guess it's about kind of expectation. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I would never have thought about that. The thing you mentioned about the heckler potentially being the CEO, that could be quite detrimental to the way the rest of the gig goes.
That's it. I mean, and it's happened before. Yeah, like you've got to be really careful about what you're saying, what to, and who, and then obviously in a comedy club, if someone complains that they were offended by something you said, the club doesn't care. In a corporate gig, which is why in corporate gigs, like I have a lot of meetings. Like this is my gig book, for example, and so all these pages of notes are all meetings about corporate gigs, where basically often when you have these kind of pre-meeting meetings, they're kind of telling you what they want, but also I'm kind of grilling them on what they don't want, in the respect that obviously I don't, because I'm often saying to them, I don't need a list of topics that I can't do. You don't need to give me a list of like, don't mention AIDS or cancer or, or the war or, but often there's hot potato topics that might be related to that industry that I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, actually one example, to use a slightly strange one is, I was doing a gig at the Algonquin Resort a few years ago for, I think it was a North American finance group. And I launched into a routine about seeing a moose for the first time, which is a fairly innocuous thing for a new Canadian to talk about. And the whole room kind of froze up, and I didn't know why. And basically a member of their group had a non-fatal, but still, a car accident with a moose yesterday. Okay. So suddenly the word moose was very triggering to this room.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm often trying to eke that stuff out, because yeah, you really can't upset a single person in a corporate gig, because if they complain, that's it becomes a problem.
Okay. Wow. That makes it pretty tough. You got to be on your toes. You got to be prepared.
Yeah. Big time. Yeah. So you have a very kind of safe set. Yeah.
Okay. Thinking about too, just kind of different types of like gigs. Like I'm kind of like, I know the opener kind of has a different set of responsibilities than the headliner has. Is that something you can maybe shed light on? Like,
yes. Yeah, that's a good question. Because yeah, there's a misnomer often that comedians will kind of book openers that aren't as good as them because they want to shine brighter, which only an egomaniac and or a moron would do that. Because of course, I mean, the audience deserves a good night from beginning to end. Also, how insecure and stupid a comedian would you have to be so insecure that you need someone to bomb before you can actually shine? And also similarly, I mean, by the way in which, laughter is this contagious thing that has momentum. So if someone, for a moment, I book with the funny, in some cases I book comedians that I think and know are better than me, to open for me. So that, the show starts in this huge kind of, crescendo gales of laughter. So by the time I walk out there, the audience is completely primed. But yes, what's interesting is how a lot of comedians will have different rules for their openers. Like I did one for a comedian, a well-known comedian, a couple of weeks ago, and his request, and he's not clean at all, and I would say is fairly bold and brave at handling hot potato topics, race topics. But he had said to me, because he likes to build up slowly to the kind of, dirtier stuff, he wanted me to open clean. And obviously opening clean is a request you get a lot from obviously clean comedians. Like I've opened for Ron James, Jerry D. It's a fairly standard request for comics like that. Mm-hmm. But he was very adamant that he wanted to obviously build up to, so he was like, yes, maybe if you need to use an F-bomb, use it, but equally try and do the opening set clean. Mm-hmm. That said, I have been known to ask openers, not if they don't want to, but if I'm looking at a crowd and I'm not sure about them, I've asked them to sometimes, test the water with an F-bomb so I can see what the reaction is.
Okay.
I think, it kind of varies for every comedian, but to my mind, the opener's job is very much to get out there and get the crowd going, because crowds need to be warmed up. And I see it and feel it often when I do a lot of theatre shows on the road where it's just me. So I kind of go up and I just do like an hour and a half or 2 hours straight. And often the first 20 minutes is not quiet, but I notice a lift of, and I always think, it's like, it starts off and it's going quite well, they're laughing along, but then after about 20 minutes, when it builds up to like the full house, kind of deafening laughter, a big applause on each joke. Okay. It's funny, I always, when that shift occurs about 15, 20 minutes, and I always think, that's the point at which the opener would have finished.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You're like opening for yourself in that sense.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it. Yeah. So sometimes I'll save the biggest, the laughs, the gags that I know get the biggest laughs for after that.
Okay.
Because I don't want to burn them too early on, because I know they won't get what they in theory deserve.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, do you feel like some anxiety as you're like waiting for that shift to come through?
Sometimes I try to not, because I try to not overthink it. But
okay.
But there's often times during a show when you're kind of like up there thinking, what's going on here? Like, mm-hmm. I mean, when was I? There was a gig. Oh, it was last weekend. I had a show last weekend where just sometimes you'll get a crowd that are very hard to read. Like you'll do a joke, it'll get a massive laugh, and you'll be like, well, if they liked that, they're going to love this next one. And then you do it, and then that doesn't get very much. And you're like, And with some audiences, you don't really get a momentum. You're back to square one with each punchline. They're basically like, okay, yes, we like that. No, we don't like that. Mm-hmm. And it's quite interesting. Whereas I love it when there's this kind of momentum. But I think the key always is just to accept. Again, I think one of the biggest mistakes that newer comedians make, well, I say newer, a lot of comedians make, including some very experienced ones, is getting frustrated with the audience or getting frustrated full stop because things aren't going exactly. And it's like getting frustrated is not going to help. Like this audience doesn't know what your expectations are. They've bought the ticket. They've come out. They're having fun. And similarly, often, I mean, there's a thing that I sometimes do where if there's one person kind of not laughing or not, or looking quite stern, all I can see is them. There could be 500 other people laughing, but all I can see is this one person. Mm-hmm. And reason I've learned to kind of not get bothered by that or not make reference to it. Some comics will pull that person up. They'll be like, we haven't cracked a smile all night, or are you having a good time? Why didn't you tell your face? All these things. The reason I don't I now try not to trouble myself by panicking or indeed singling that person out is I have found oddly over the years that invariably that is the person that will come up to you after the show going, oh my God, that show was amazing. And of course, again, you are thinking, well, why not convey that through? But everyone enjoys things differently, of course, right? You know, I guess it's the same as sex. Not everyone has like a big screaming orgasm. Some people just do it silently. And similarly with comedy, people can enjoy it quietly. And of course, I mean, it's not helpful for a comedian if the whole audience is enjoying it quietly. But it is. I started to notice this pattern of generally the grumpiest looking person in the room who barely cracked a smile was often the first person to come running up at the end going, oh my God, I love that. Okay. That is a real mind melt.
That's a good lesson. Yeah. And from my experience playing music, that could happen sometimes too, where the guy at the back of the bar with his arms crossed. Right. I used to play in heavy metal. So you kind of used to everyone kind of jumping around and all that stuff. But yeah, the person at the back of the room who's got his arms crossed might be doing the same thing. He or she is really taking it in and analyzing it and enjoying it just because of enjoying it for what it is.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, you as a heavy metal band, you want to see this kind of insane reaction, people leaping around, you know, headbanging, mosh pit, all the rest of it. But yes, to your point, like, yeah, some people can enjoy things in different ways, right?
Yeah. Yep. Very interesting.
What was the name of your band, by the way?
We the Undersigned.
We the Undersigned. Nice. I've heard of you guys. You guys do lots of shows, right?
We used to. Like, we broke up a handful of years ago, but we played across the country a few times. And yeah.
Cool. I will be checking out stuff out there. Nice.
Yeah. Another question too, I thought actually, one thing I'd always heard about riders and people having artists having interesting things in their riders. And then you mentioned that like the no red M&Ms thing is more of like a test to see if the crew's paying attention.
Yes.
I'd never considered that before.
Really? Yes, it's interesting. It's funny because that example of the M&M one, which I think, is it Van Halen? I think that had that. Was it? I can't remember what I said in the book.
Yeah, it might have been. Or someone had no brown I don't know if brown M&Ms even.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was no brown M&Ms. And I think it's famously Van Halen. But yes, lots of bands did it. But it's funny because the brown M&M story is often used as an example of, you know, egos out of control.
Yeah.
But yes, the reality is, to anyone listening that hasn't heard this, is that bands would put this very specific, somewhat ludicrous request in their riders so that when they walked in the dressing room, if there wasn't a bowl of M&Ms without the brown M&Ms in, they know that the tech people at the venue haven't read the rider properly. So it means that they need to go and double check all their tech. Because also that's the other thing. I mean, I find it hard enough at venues just trying to make sure that the spotlights on the stage, the lights in the room are dark, and the bloody microphone works. But that's hard enough. I can't imagine what it would be like turning up and there's 2 trucks worth of gear and you've got pyro going off. And there's, I mean, let's face it, there's a huge safety aspect at play here as well. So yeah, they would then use it as a test of like, is this team on it?
Okay.
And I can completely understand it. I mean, I would say tech is one of the, especially as someone that's like, I do have agents that book certain things, but generally, especially with touring, I am a complete. I'm a one-man band. So I'm doing everything. I'm booking the shows myself, negotiating with the venues. I am, in charge of my own travel. There's this bitter irony that like I spend more time sitting at this desk doing admin work than I did when I had an admin desk job. But that's the reality of life in the creative arts. But I would say enforcing my rider or request. And again, my rider is, and that's the other thing is people, when they hear rider, they think of, again, just egomaniacs and Mariah Carey wanting, rooms at a certain temperature and everything needing to be, white or certain rugs or carpets brought in. Whereas my rider, basically, I think what my rider reads like, it reads like a list of disasters that have occurred, because every time something goes wrong, I then it gets added. So for example, and when you are dealing with a professional, they're kind of somewhat surprised by some of the things on your rider, because they're like, well, why have you given me a rider that says seats facing stage? I'm like, because guess what? I turn out to a gig with the seats facing the stage, a microphone that works, a mic stand that stays up on its own, that doesn't keep falling over, water on stage. I mean, just small things which, again, especially for comedy, I mean, the request is very basic, but for the most part, it just doesn't happen. And it's so crucial, obviously, because, again, it's crucial for everyone, but with music, I guess, if you can't hear every lyric that's being sung, you can still enjoy the music. But if you can't hear what the comedian's saying, or you're straining to hear certain words, the whole thing's shot to pieces. An example I will give, I did a gig last September for the Power Union Workers of Ontario. And basically the rider was sent, it was signed off, it was agreed. And this is the problem, is you have the rider, it's signed, it's agreed. It's also agreed, obviously, that, that these are the standards by which must be met, or the show doesn't happen. But the reality is, I fly to Toronto, get my rental car, drive to Niagara, turn up at soundcheck 3 hours before the show. The stage is all wobbly. The mic doesn't really work. It's poppy. It's feedbacky. It's weak. There's no stage lighting. The only lights are the lights for the room. So the room has to be like brightly lit, like an interrogation chamber. Everything's wrong. But what am I going to do? Like, we're in Niagara. There's no tech team nearby that can. There's no rental place open. It's a Saturday afternoon. What am I going to do? I'm not going to not do the show, but I know it's going to be a disaster. And not that I go into it thinking like that. I do go into it positively, but it's just very interesting what a difference tech makes, in that if that stage hadn't been wobbly, if that mic had worked, if the stage lights had worked and the audience had been dimmed, I would say there was a 95% chance that gig could have been an absolute barnstormer. Instead, it was terrible. They were all, staring at me. It didn't go well. But again, the problem is they're not sat there thinking this tech is terrible. They're thinking this comedian's terrible, which is why you try and enforce this stuff. And again, I mean, I mentioned this gig I had yesterday morning, which was phenomenally well organized, and the tech was just impeccable. Encore at the training convention here in St. John. Encore the team. I wasn't saying I got an encore, although, and they were, but yeah, so my point was that it was 10 a.m. doing a keynote / stand-up. Okay. But it was one of those examples where everything was so well done. They had big screens, the sound worked perfectly. I had a comfort monitor. I had they dimmed the lights in the room. The stage lights were perfect. Everything was meticulous. And of course, and after the fact, when I'm going over and thanking each of the techs individually, and people are like, well, it was all you. And it's like, no, it's not me, because literally, if those things that you all did so well hadn't been done, I would have died on my ass. There's no two ways around it. It would have been a categoric disaster. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting thing with the tech side, and trying to convey to people how important it is. And also, I guess what's weird, when people do try and cut those costs, like in the case of this Power Union, I mean, they've flown 500 people out to Niagara. You imagine the cost of this event, the food, the hotels, the entertainment, all the stuff. We're talking, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars they've spent. But at some point, some idiot has gone, let's save $500 here and not give him the stage lights he wanted. Let's not bother with a mic that works. Yeah. And it's like, why fly a comedian out, pay the money, and then not have the ability to be heard? It's I don't know. It's like paying it's your point about fixing cars. It's like paying a mechanic by the hour to fix your car, but then insisting he does it without any of his tools. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. We couldn't afford to get you the tools, so just use your hands, please.
That's it. That's exactly. Yeah. It's mad.
That's interesting. Yeah. So it is kind of about setting yourself up for success, which is the success for the crowd too. Is having a good time.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, okay. And then not having to strain, it's especially with comedy where it's all so precise and finite, and it's all wordplay and it's pauses and all that stuff. If the crowd can't hear you perfectly, then that just doesn't work. right? That's the thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. Yeah, so that just kind of changed my mind about the whole the red M&M or brown M&M thing. So I thought that, it's very neat.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, like for years, I think people have thought that story was about a band, out of control with egomania. And meanwhile, they were just trying to make sure that the tech was working perfectly.
Yeah, and the safety. It just reminded me of like I saw like a short or whatever put up by Paramore where their pyro went off at the wrong moment, and you could tell like the singer Haley, I think her name is, was just like she's singing a song. But right behind her is like flames going off that aren't supposed to be going off. So
I mean, it's a genuine like life-threatening concern.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Do you have any bits or jokes that you love to death, and you keep them in your show, or you use them even though they never seem to land with the audience?
Yes, good question. Yes, I mean, there's a couple of examples. I mean, generally, there's bits each year when I try and turn over new material. There's bits where because generally it's hard to know what the best rule of thumb is when you have a new bit and you've got a new idea. And this is part of the process I'm in right now, while I'm still up to the last minute, like workshopping new material for the St. John High show in a couple of weeks. And there's bits that I know there's like, I know there's something in. Sometimes I'll test a joke 2, 3, 4 times. If it's not working, I'll toss it. And then sometimes you go, there's definitely something in this and I can't quite get it right. And you'll keep doing it. And then one night, possibly after trying it 20, 30, 40, 50 times, something will click. And it could be anything. It could be the change of a word. It could be the change of intonation. It could be the change of where you leave a pause. But to answer your question, in terms of bits in my act, I would say there's a joke where I do about when I joke about the Grand Bay Westfield ferry boat and how the first time I saw it coming through billowing smoke, and it looked like something out of Greek mythology, and that often gets a laugh because people can kind of picture that. But then I make reference to a Greek myth story, which I actually don't even know the specifics of, and you might, I can't remember them offhand, but basically that whole thing about needing to put a coin under your hat to get to the other side. I think it's like to get to the other side of, in the myth, it's like to get to an afterlife.
Okay.
But so I often in this joke say, the line about it looks like something out of Greek mythology always gets a laugh. The line after the next line always gets a laugh. But in the middle, I always say, I looked at this thing and thought, how will I get to the other side? I don't have a coin to put under my hat. And it's so specific to this Greek myth. And generally, in a crowd of 800, maybe 3 will laugh. But I know those 3 are absolutely loving it. and it's kind of like it's throwaway and quick enough that it's not unnoticeable that joke bombed, because I can keep going. But I always leave it in because I love it, because I love thinking of these. Whichever lunatic has chosen to study, Greek mythology, they are sat in that crowd thinking, "Holy smokes, there's a joke just for me."
Yeah, exactly.
And then similarly, I mean, and this is more of, I guess, an Easter egg than a joke not working. But when I'm performing in other parts of the country, I will make reference to things that are very specific to here. Like when I do a joke about going to the doctors, I will name Dr. Daniel Scott from Grand Bay Westfield Doctor Surgery. And I do it because once in a while, I mean, given how even though this country is vast landmass, it often feels like a small village. Once in a while, I'll hear a laugh knowing that person knows that guy.
Yeah.
And likewise, the Kingston Peninsula. I mean, Kingston Peninsula, even in New Brunswick's not that well known. Less known in BC. But I mean, one of the best comments I ever got was after I was headlining Yuck Yucks in Toronto maybe 6 years ago, and I did a joke about Kingston Peninsula, and the audience kind of laughed. They kind of got the gist of it, but didn't really. But again, there was a handful of people from here clearly loving it. And after the show, this guy came up to me and said that I never thought I'd be watching in a comedy club in downtown Toronto and hear someone make reference to the Kingston Peninsula ferries. There's that, but then there's I'm saying, there's one. Again, I'm kind of getting there. There's a bit that I'm working on, which is kind of trying to compare British soccer to Canadian hockey. And kind of the joke I'm trying to make work is that it's interesting how England's this very kind of violent place in terms of like football. Hooligans are violent and city centres are violent, but Canada's very peaceful. Like you don't get hockey hooligans. There's no fights in the parking lot. There's no, and you go out in a city centre in Canada, anywhere in Canada, there's not fights and riots going on every Friday, Saturday night. In England, there is in every town and city. But yet, conversely, on the soccer pitch, there is no violence. Like if anything, there's the opposite. These guys are pathetic. Like one of them brushes up against the other one, they fall on the ground pretending they've been hurt. And yet, in hockey, in the most peaceful country in the world, out on the ice, suddenly they're just pummeling each other in the face, you know, beating each other with sticks. And yet, if you punch someone in British soccer, you would be you would be banned for like a year. I mean, and yet in hockey, you can beat someone over the head with a stick and then you just get put in a little box for a minute, you know? And so I've been trying to make that work as a routine for years.
Okay.
And it's got some of the beats, but they're not quite there. But again, I know one day I'll get it there.
Okay. That's interesting. I like thinking about the process. That's really cool. It's kind of like, workshopping songs too. Even if you're not quite finished the tune, you're playing it out in front of folks or whatever. That's really neat.
Just trying to measure a reaction. And so I have piles of papers behind me like that high for this year's term of just jokes that I just try on stage every night. And then there's also that fear often of what if some of those jokes that I've kind of discarded, what if there was the genesis or, you know, the seed of a good idea there? And I've just tossed it. And some of those things come back. But yeah, it's interesting seeing how things evolve.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe just since you brought up football, my buddy Jason, he asked me if I could ask you what your favorite football team was.
Oh, well, I tell you what, it's funny because in England, I never followed it when I lived there. Possibly. I think a British soccer fan would have trouble leaving England and moving away. But my youngest son, River, plays soccer. He plays soccer in gold for Funny Soccer. Loves it. So he's got me into it. So 2 years ago, we went to our first ever Premiership games. We went to see Crystal Palace play Wolverhampton Wanderers, the Wolves. So I now support Crystal Palace. They are my Crystal Palace are my team. Who does your buddy support?
I can't remember actually. He probably told me in his text message, but I was just in my mind. It's funny that you choose Crystal Palace because you must have known that was like an amusement park in Moncton.
Right, good point. That's a good point. I've forgotten that, but yes, you might someone tell me that. Yes, that's
funny. Yeah, that's deep in my childhood.
Nice. Yeah, I would love to go back in time and visit
Crystal Palace.
I've heard great things about it. I know people have happy memories.
Yeah.
You're right. That goes to show how entrenched in New Brunswick past and history I am.
That's funny.
My favourite British football team is a defunct theme park where a theme park used to be.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Oh, that's so good. Well, we're almost out of time, but can I sneak in one more quick question here?
Please do, my friend. Yes.
So me and my wife, one of our annual traditions. I mean, really, it's her annual. She has so many cool tastes and stuff that I get to usurp from her, like her tastes in music and video games and comedy. I've just steal from her and say they're mine. So one of our traditions is watching the Big Fat Quiz Show every year.
Oh, yes.
And I was kind of wondering if there's any like British things like that, or like even if it's a saying that you're like adamant on importing into the province, like you're just like, I'm going to get people hooked on this. I don't care what it takes.
That's a bloody good question. I mean, I have to say, and I know this is a family station, but I mean, the one thing I struggled with saying goodbye to when I moved here was the C word, because of course, as you would have seen on that, I mean, that is a panel show, a chat show, a quiz show. That is shown that the whole family is watching, and the comedians are not afraid to bandy around the C word. That would not happen on, and I do understand the cultural difference, and I should make it clear to anyone listening that I understand that the C word in North America is a misogynistic word. In England, it is very much not, right? That's not how it's used. The example I would give in reverse would be the word bitch, which I find in North America can be used in a kind of a Jesse Pinkman, yo, bitch way. In England, the B word is a very misogynistic word that is generally only used by men in a derogatory way towards women, which is, as I understand, how the C word is used here in North America. I didn't know that until I saw Tony Soprano use it in The Sopranos. In England, it's a term of endearment that is, I mean, I know it's also not, it's not polite language, but it is definitely tossed around. So not that, I mean, I know it's not great form for me to say, hey, you know, my campaign is to bring the C word to North America.
Yeah.
But that's a routine I've done a couple of times, which is, it can split a room because, of course, it involves saying the word, and I understand it is a fancy bit. There are lots of things. Another confusing one, which also I guess is a swear word. This is gonna be a hard one to do with it, but I guess it's like, can I say can I swear on this or no?
Yeah. I mean, we don't do F-bombs, but I can always bleep it out too. It's no problem.
Out, yeah. Well, the word I was going to say was hear how you say when someone's annoyed, they say they're pissed.
Yeah.
But in England, being pissed means to be drunk.
Uh-huh.
So again, that took some getting used to coming here, and people are like, oh yeah, oh man, you know, your wife's going to be pissed. Well, she is going to be pissed because I'm pissed, you know. Yeah. Yes, it should. I mean, there's lots of English phrases that I like to use on stage, which again, to your point earlier about like lovely, jubbly, bish, bash, bosh, sweet as a nut. That's what I miss actually, is the Cockney rhyming slang.
Okay.
You know, like, because Cockney rhyming slang, they say, was kind of invented by kind of, you know, Cockney East End gangsters so that people didn't understand what they were saying. But it's, you know, it's like, so, you know, stairs are apples and pears. Well, I'll give you an example. Like people will say, they'll say, oh, mate, I want to go down a battle, but I want to go down a battle. I don't want to get two Schindlers. I've only got a Nelson. I mean, do you know what I just said?
No, my wife would know. She was here, but I know.
She would know. So what I just said was that I want to go down the pub, and I don't want to get too drunk, and I've only got a tenner. So that was, I'm going down a battle cruiser, boozer. Okay. I don't want to get too Schindler's. Yeah. Schindler's List, pissed. I've only got a Nelson Mandela tenner. I mean, it's literally, so those are all things that I kind of miss. But phrases, I'm thinking of any other ones. I mean, those would be the main ones. But yes, it is funny. Oh, well, and it was interesting coming here and trying to navigate these changes. Because again, in stand-up, if you say, I remember my first weekend living here, was doing a series of shows at the Comic Strip in Edmonton, in West Edmonton Mall. And I had a punchline that involved referring to something being stolen. But it was, in England, the word nicked is the word that you would, I guess, here would be jacked or you know, pinched or, but so nicked, but here obviously nicked means, I guess, nicking something or, anyway, but as a result, because of the confusion over the word, the joke doesn't land. But yes, it must be interesting watching those British shows and seeing. Do you watch Taskmaster as well?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, you would like that if you like Big Fat Quiz of the Year. I'd love to, and I'm sure you watch 8 out of 10 Cats and.
No, we're like big into the IT Crowd and Peep Show and Still Game. Though I don't know if Still Game's from.
It's Ireland, but yeah, UK.
Still Game. I'll have to stop and ask my wife because like one of the characters I can't. I've been listening to we've listened to almost all the series or the seasons, or watch them, I should say. Yeah. And I'll be like, Kendall, I have no idea what she just said. Like, I can't understand it.
That's hilarious. And where's your wife from?
She's from Ontario, but she grew up we're both from Sussex.
Oh, nice. Beautiful. Yeah. I love Sussex. My favorite. I haven't performed there in a while. It's one of my favorite places to perform.
Yeah, it's a great little town to grow up in. Yeah. That's for sure.
It must be. Yeah, I love it.
I'll have to get some recommendations from you for TV shows, actually.
Yeah, so Big Fat Quiz of the Year, I would say, is essentially a spin-off of Jimmy Carr's 8 out of 10 Cats.
Oh, okay.
Which is a kind of a weekly panel show, which again, you know, it's really interesting to see because this is the thing that's so sad. The fact that Canada doesn't have we've got all these amazing comedians in this country, so much stuff going on in the news. And yet there's no panel shows. In England, there's like 20. Mock the Week is another one. Yeah. These shows where they just put comedians on panels and let them do what they want and be funny. We've
got the debaters, really, right? Is that one of the?
Yeah. On radio, like the show, I mean, that should be on TV. It really should be. I think they did test a pilot and it didn't work. So now CBC have been, scared to recommission it or redo it. But that would make a great TV show. But
very cool. Days. Dark Place by Garth Marenghi's Dark Place is another one we love. Yeah, that's so funny. That's
awesome. Yeah, I'll send you a list for sure.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, so I know we kind of went over our time here, James, so maybe we'll mess someone up.
Absolute pleasure. But no, thanks for having me, Jay. I love everything you're doing. I can't wait to check out your music. And yeah, excited for everything that follows, my friend.
Very cool. Yeah, and everyone listening, April 26th at St. John High, 7:30, right? So there's still tickets left, or they're getting pretty low, I imagine.
Yeah, there's still tickets left. I think there's still about 100 left. It's in the big Dennis Nib Auditorium there. 90 minutes to 2 hours of laughter. Hopefully, if I do my job well, you'll be laughing for 2 hours. Is what I'm trying to say.
Awesome.
And yeah, lots of other shows coming up. That same week, I'm doing Hampton Brewing Company and Long Bay Brewery, and then lots of shows at St. John Theatre Company over the summer with CBC's Ali Hassan, and lots at the at Yip Cider Dome on the Kingston Peninsula.
Very cool.
So come out to a show, people. Come and have some fun.
And speaking of the peninsula, maybe we'll just plug the short film there that came up on your YouTube there a few days ago, the peninsula.
Yes,
really nicely shot.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, can't take any credit. My amazing collaborator Tyler Warren Ellis was the director on that, and my son Hunter Mullinger wrote the script. Cool. And won lots of awards at various film festivals around the world. And the full film is there. But yeah, again, Sussex and the Kingston Peninsula are the two places I make the most jokes about, and I love the most. We roast the people we love.
Yeah, we're from Sussex, and my wife used to work in making wine for people. So it's just it's just perfect. Yeah, so really appreciate. Yeah, it's really funny. So thanks a lot, James. I appreciate you giving me some of your time.
Oh, not at all, Jay. Thank you very much, my friend. Really, really, really nice chatting with you.
Awesome. Yeah, you too. All right, have a good one.
Thanks, mate.
All right, welcome back to the Radical Fabulatorium. Man, that was a great chat, wasn't it? Pretty interesting. And, there's all kinds of interesting stories in his audiobook or his book, Brit Happens, that we didn't touch on. I mean, he's got stories involving the Comedy Store, Jerry Seinfeld, Paul McCartney. Sounds like in his